commissioners, starting with Brandon Cruikshank. I don't see Brandon on.
He's excused.
Excused today. Thank you. Justin Denardi.
Also not expecting Justin tonight.
Matt Eckhoff. Thank you.
Present.
Joe Koenig.
Present.
Erica Maza. I think I might see her online. But maybe not. And then Ann Dunno with Mountain Line.
Present.
Thank you. Okay, and then moving into the agenda for this afternoon. First item, preliminary general business. I guess we'll start first with the public comment. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission on any subject within the commission's jurisdiction that is not on this meeting's agenda. The Arizona Open Meeting Law prohibits the commission from discussing or taking action on an item that is not listed on the prepared agenda. Commissioners may, however, respond to criticism made by those addressing the commission, ask staff to review a matter, or ask that a matter be placed on a future agenda. To address the commission on an item that is on the agenda, please wait for the chair to call for public comment at the time the item is heard. And so with that, is there any public that would like to make a comment? I don't see, I'm not sure if there's any online. And I don't see any, so unless I'm missing any, we will move along. The next item is approval of minutes from December 1st, 2021, no, 2022, sorry, January 13th, 2023, and February 1st of 2023. Is there a motion to approve?
This is Erica. I will make a motion to approve the minutes of December 1, 2021, January 13, 2022, and February 1, 2023.
Thank you.
Is that a correct date for January 13th, though?
Yes, those are the correct dates on the agenda.
Oh, they are the correct dates on the agenda? Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. And the motion matched the agenda, so we're good.
Excellent. All right, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you. New business. First item is City of Flagstaff 5-year capital improvement plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff Bauman, City Traffic Engineer. I'm going to jump in and do this one for Trevor Henry, our Capital Improvements Engineer, who's off this afternoon. This is the same presentation that the City Council will see at the retreat on Friday for the transportation portion of the CIP. They have an all-day retreat. This is probably 1 hour of that retreat. I won't take an hour to go through these slides. If you have any questions, please ask. Again, not quite my presentation, but I know about all these projects, so this should go pretty well. I'm having a little trouble getting it to connect from there, so I'm just going to connect from this laptop, which I see is streaming well. So this is a series of projects. These are The projects that we're going to cover with the council and with you are the active projects. There's certainly more projects in the out years of the program. Typically, it's a 5-year program. The 5-year program is not quite ready to release. We'll get that to you at the next meeting. But this is all of the active projects, so projects in design or construction here in the current year and the next year, typically. A little bit of extra information beyond that, but that's generally what you'll see with these projects. So the first one is a series of projects. We call it the Downtown Mile. Oh, I didn't want to do that to you. Oh, sorry. There we go. Downtown Mile, it's a series of 6 projects, and you can see them in the little inlay. You've heard of a lot of these projects over the years. They were independent projects, and recently, about a year, probably a year and a half ago at this point, we applied for an infra grant through the federal government and were awarded that grant. And that gave us the ability to pull together these projects and pay for some of the really big components of the project. The really big component being the Milton Road underpass. So that's the replacement of the bridge right out here in front of City Hall. So that'll be replaced. It will fix the grade issue on Milton Road. If you, probably you guys don't drive big trucks, but if you drove a semi truck, you'd know that you can't, a normal sized truck, an oversized truck can't go under there. So raise the bridge about 3 feet and actually move it to the north quite a ways as well. So the road drops, the bridge comes up a little, because the whole project, or the whole big point of the project, is you have to keep the railroad tracks in service while you build the new bridge, so they can't be in the same spot. So that was part of the big trick of getting this infra grant and all of this coming together. Lots more complications than that, but that's the big takeaway for this is new bridge will be going in. It will accommodate Milton Road, pedestrian improvements, actually 6 lanes on Milton. It would accommodate that in the future. It's not planned or built at this point, but it'll accommodate, you know, that the bridge is there. The bridge that's there is something like 80 years old. So you really need to look a long ways out when you're building bridges. It'll also accommodate 3 tracks on the BNSF. They can only accommodate 2 today. So when we build that, there's a bunch of track phasing going on, but you can see the Florence Walnut Underpass, which we've had on the books for probably 10 years. This will allow, all of that track movement will allow us to build that. Rio to Flag Pedestrian Underpass will also go in, so that's a new Foots Trail connection from roughly where the Downtown Connection Center is today, here to City Hall, under 66, under the railroad tracks and through the Rio. We also have the Amtrak station platform improvements. They don't meet ADA today, so these are ADA improvements. And then a couple of smaller projects, but still pretty significant. Beaver and San Francisco Street, we're doing rail crossing safety improvements. So those are one-way streets. So if you're out there, all of the gates are on one side. We're going to add pedestrian gates on the back side and some other enhancements to improve the safety at those locations. So that's Downtown Mile. Design is underway. This says design completion about a year from now. So we're in the early stages, but design is actually underway, which is pretty exciting. Stop me if you have questions, otherwise I'll just kind of keep cruising along. This is Transportation Tax Fund, which is typically referred to often internally anyways as Proposition 419. So that was the 2018 tax election. This is a number of projects that we have going, and FY23 is kind of a summary. We'll touch on some of these with their own slides, but you can see Beulah University, which broke ground this week. If you've been out there, kind of behind Burger King, you can see all the trees have come down, or many of the trees have come down. So that's kind of the first stage of that project. Lone Tree Railroad Overpass, we have a slide for that, as well as Butler 4th, Lockett 4th. Switzer Canyon Trail, we may have a slide towards the end in Martin, so I won't go over that one either. Projects in planning or design, John will say Powell. And then ATMP, a note on here is that the ATMP, the Active Transportation Master Plan, all of the projects within that program, when they land on these road projects, are implemented into those projects. So if the ATMP called for a Foots Trail or a pedestrian crossing, that gets included in these larger road projects. And a couple of out-year projects, Lone Tree Road widening O'Leary to Pine Knoll. So that kind of takes the Lone Tree Overpass section and continues it down to Pine Knoll, down by Kinsey School. And then the Country Club and Oakmont intersection. Not quite sure what we'll end up with there, but that's has a little bit of a crash history. Definitely has some operational issues if you've been through there before. So there's potential for a single lane roundabout, potentially a signal, maybe something in between, or lesser even. once we get into that, but those are still in the out years. So we have slides for a number of these bigger projects. Here's a Lone Tree overpass. Those of you that have been on the commission for a while, we had several presentations from the Lone Tree overpass team. So design concepts are done. The actual design is getting very close to being done. And we're planning to break ground still this summer or fall, pending a few moving pieces with property. But you should see construction here this year with completion in 26. It's a big, long project, but this is a pretty exciting one. This one, of course, was Proposition 420.
I have a question, Jeff.
Yeah,
The changes that will end up happening to 66 in that area, I understand that's ADOT. So will those designs come before the commission at all, or it's not required to, so they won't?
that was part of the package. So all of the whole design came before the commission last year, I guess it was. So yeah, we did both intersections, Lone Tree and Butler and Lone Tree in San Francisco. If you'd like more detail, I could send you something offline. But and we are coordinating with ADOT. You can kind of see, I don't know what elements you're interested in, but if you look closely, it's a little tough to see, but the purple lines are the Foots Trail. So the Foots Trail east-west on 66 will go under the new bridge, kind of like 4th Street today. Not the same design, but a similar grade separation. You can see there's a new crosswalk on that west leg of the intersection that'll get you over to the north side of 66, which will be pretty cool. Schweitzer Canyon Trail actually is just on the other side of all those buildings. So there's still some planning to try to get that intersection connected to the Schweitzer Canyon Trail. So a few details still to be worked out. Did you have any specific questions that I can answer, or I can just send you some?
If you can just send me
info?
that stuff offline.
I can.
Yeah, I definitely remember seeing a lot of the Lone Tree and Butler, and I just don't remember there being a final plan for the 66 and ADOT intersection yet. But yeah, thanks.
No problem. Okay, we'll keep going. Butler 4th improvements. This project is very early. Still, we're past project scoping, but we're in the very early stages of kind of the traffic analysis. So there's been traffic modeling done and some early internal work on intersection types and intersection layout. You'll definitely see that project as it starts to move forward. I think the plan still is to get this kind of early design concepts before council, before their break in July. So probably the June meeting of Transportation Commission. Hopefully this will be ready for you all to take a look at. But it's basically filling out the urban cross section. So urban cross section is going from the 2 rural lanes to 4 travel lanes, curb and gutter. You can see here we're going with, instead of on-street bike lanes, they're going to be the separated bike lanes connected to the sidewalks, separated by a 5-foot parkway from the street. And this will go from about Sanawa Heights at the east end all the way back to and through a good portion of Little America at the interchange. So it'll be pretty nice. The strange diagonal intersection that comes into Butler is Harold Ranch Road. That'll be realigned to a 90-degree intersection. And we're still in design concepts, but it's long been thought to be a roundabout. This helps with access control in that corridor and getting trucks turning around instead of making the left turns and the cross movements on Butler. And then Butler and 4th intersection will raise 5 or 6 feet for drainage concerns, and also leveling out that intersection as you come down 4th Street. So better grades and raising it for drainage. And this is all in coordination with all the construction activity you're seeing along that corridor. So pretty cool project. Again, early stages of design. This says design completion about a year from now. So we'll definitely see this as a discussion item with the commission. This is an older project, but still an active project, the 4-seater Lockett Roundabout. This we did talk to the commission about a couple of times. Plans, I think I saw 95% plans, so that's very close to being done, come through my desk, I think just last week. So these are just about done. This is converting the traffic signal at 4-seater Lockett to a modern roundabout. You can see in this image some striping and signing. There's a number of push button actuated pedestrian crossings. You can kind of see the Z crossings for the pedestrians. This will add that 4th leg on the west side, which is going to be a nice improvement for the school and for the school kids that have to cross 3 legs to get to school today. half paid for with the Highway Safety Improvement Program grant and half with city funding. That should be under construction next summer to coincide, the major construction to coincide with school being out for the summer. So that's the big trick with this one.
Jeff, can I ask? 95% design, you said, is that going to come before commission, as that design kind of comes to a head?
Yeah, so it did come to the commission and kind of, we've gone through the commission and the city council, excuse me, kind of at the 60% design or sometimes at 30% design. The major things don't change after that point. It basically, the design gets fleshed out. You add signs, you add striping, you add underground drainage and all the utilities and things. So we tried to bring the concepts forward early to the commission and the council. So happy to show you the design, but it wasn't coming back, for a discussion item. But if you're interested, I'm happy to share more.
Love to
detail.
see the details, absolutely.
Okay.
And do some research on the history of the discussion.
I'll send
Absolutely.
that out to
Thank
the
you.
commission. Yep. John Wesley Powell Extension. So this is also a project for, all these are 419 funded typically, but this was a real big road improvement project coming out of Proposition 419. You can see the budget is $45 million in total. The city share is 40%, which is $18 million. This is connecting, I'll use my cursor. This is connecting at that Butler and 4th intersection. And the roadway is on this yellow alignment, which was a point of discussion with the city council last summer. We got direction to go with this yellow alignment and through the forest all the way back over to where the road ends today at Pine Canyon. So a couple miles of arterial in the very early planning stages. We're working with these. It's interesting, these large property owners, Kenny Del Rio, Little America, Gibson, Symmetry, and Juniper Point on the alignment, right-of-way dedication. So coming along, you'll see more of that in the future. There's not a lot to talk about at this point as it's just a planning study, at least for this commission. Oh,
Jeff, can I ask a question about
sure.
process on this project?
Yeah.
What's this next steps? This is a specific area plan. Is that still the case with this project?
Yeah, there's a couple of things going on. There's a specific area plan and the scope of work for that is going to be before, I don't remember the date, but it's in the next month or so before city council for a change order to continue this process, the planning process.
So I guess my question is more around what's the public outreach feedback process, public participation plan for this project at the next step? I know there has been in the past some level, but I think, yeah, maybe you can just.
So the last time the public saw this was with the city council discussions last summer to determine the roadway alignment. There's specific area planning, which is kind of land use things going on or will be going on after that change order is approved. I don't know what the next steps are for public involvement. I'm sure we'll make sure it comes to this commission and there will be outreach. I just don't know because I guess we're a month away from even signing that contract. So I just don't quite know what those next steps are. Yeah, keep an eye out for it. You will hear about it as it moves forward. And then we're into the pedestrian and bike projects. And I think Martin is online. He and I didn't choreograph or coordinate this. We'll see if he's available to run through these. At the retreat, he will do all of these slides. So let's see if he jumps in. If not, I get to go for these as well. Martin, are you there?
I am here. If I stayed quiet, does that mean you would do it for me?
You could have gone with that option.
Oh, too late now.
Thank you, Martin. I'll advance slides as you are ready.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, this is as you remember from the transportation tax, it's kind of allocated into different funds, and so this covers the ped bike projects that we have in the capital plan in next year's budget. And we start with kind of a summary of where we're getting our funding from. And I think this is the first time we make this. I think this information has been out there kind of before, but it's the first time we're making it to this version of the council. So it's kind of important to give them a little bit of background on where we are. So over the 21-year life of the transportation tax, about 29 million is allocated for ped and bike. But in the first 5 years, we're getting 2 million per year, so a total of $10 million. And then the Mountain Line has a first mile, last mile grant, total of 6.9 million. That's made up of 5.5 in federal funding and 1.4 in city match. So if you add those two together, we're getting about $15.5 million for ped and bike projects in the first 5 years. So go ahead to the next slide. And again, I think for the next slide, in the interest of providing the information to the council that the new council members that they may not have seen before, we provide some information on kind of how we got to this point, how projects were selected, and how they were prioritized. And I'll skip down. You may have seen this before on the Transportation Commission, but I'll skip down to those last couple of bullet points. We did have a lot of community engagement as part of this, and the process and the projects are outlined and addressed in the Active Transportation Master Plan and the regional plan as well. So that's kind of how we got to this point. And then I think we go through in the next slide. We start to go through the budget request and the capital plan section by section. The first part is some general things. General planning. The first bullet point is for staff time, including some allocation of my time in my position. We will tell the council at this point that increases in staff in the transportation section will be addressed at a future retreat. That's the operational budget, not the capital budget. So if they ask about that, we'll give them that answer. This is really just capital projects. Project pre-design is money that we have for doing concept plans or 15% plans. We've already used that money to do the 2 protected intersections along Butler at Beaver and San Francisco. And now we're working on concept plans for a raised bike lane along Butler. And then Vision Zero Action Plan is, I think it's $200,000 for a potential planning effort for a Vision Zero plan. And then I think at this point, I think that's an active link where we'll show them where all the projects are included in the overall planning map, online planning map. I don't know, Jeff, if you want to do that now, or if the commissioners, yeah, we might as well take a look at it. If you've got it, this will be a good test to see if it actually works. Okay, so it comes up with a blank base map, but you can see some of the categories on the left of, yeah, I think, I apologize. We need to kind of work to see if we can, it doesn't often come up like that, to see if we can make that a little bit more readable. But in essence, what we have in those different categories, everything that's existing and everything that's planned for different types of crossings, foot trails, bikeways, and sidewalks. So you can kind of see how they interact with each other. For example, if you look at the foots plan and then look at separated crossings, you can see how some of them kind of make more sense when they work together. We also have, you can show each one of those categories by priority and by time frame. So the time frame means if they're planned in the next 5 years, they're part of the capital plan. If they're within the next 20 years, like we can afford to pay for them with the transportation tax proceeds, or if they're beyond 20 years. And they're color coded. Red is 5-year, orange is 20-year, and then blue is beyond 20 years. And this is somewhat interactive. You can zoom in, you can turn on an aerial and kind of get a little bit of detail about where projects are, again, how they work together. And then I think one more thing, if you click on any one of those dots or lines, you can kind of get more detail about that particular project. Yeah, so there's a sidewalk project along the east side of Turquoise. And you can see that that's a second priority, but its time frame is beyond 20 years. So in the original presentation to council, we had a series of maps that showed them where some of these program facilities are. And we thought maybe we would provide this for them as a link and just show them how to use it. And then they can kind of see for themselves where we have facilities, where we're missing infrastructure, and what's planned and what its priority is. So I'll pause if there are any questions about what we've covered so far about the map. Otherwise, we can kind of dive into some of the specific projects that are in the 5-year plan.
Yes, Commissioner Dunno has a question.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hansen. Yeah, thank you, Martin. A great tool. I love this dynamic tool and a lot of detail. I guess I have a question about process that you have working with approvals on your programming. So for example, if there's certain projects that are at north of 20 years and there's other within the 20 year and there's those in 5 years, is the process for planning and capital planning in general open to feedback from, say, maybe council? Maybe there's a reprioritization or expediting certain projects forward. I guess that's one question. And I guess if there is, how does that process work?
Yeah, I think in general, we're open to that. Ultimately, as part of this process, the council has the ultimate say, so they could give us direction or whatever about, moving some projects forward, maybe or prioritizing other ones. It's a lot of information for them, so I think they tend to give a lot of leeway to staff and don't get into the details of individual projects too much, but because they have the final authority to make those decisions, they can certainly give us that direction. Beyond that, I think, every, maybe not every year, but maybe every couple years, we can take a look to see if the priorities are still valid or if things have changed in a way that would change priorities. For example, if there's a development on the horizon and it moves forward, that may change the priority or the urgency of building some of the facilities that are nearby. So I think we need to have built into the process an opportunity to look at things that have changed and to see if priorities have changed or not as we move forward every couple of years. And I think all of this, both what we're doing now and any reconsideration of priorities or reprioritization or going through this process again in the future, the public ought to be involved and have an opportunity to weigh in and tell us what they think are the important projects or the important priorities.
Thank you.
So this is an example of what I talked about before with the project pre-design. And I know the council has a particular interest in these projects or in this area, so we wanted to highlight that for them. And we have already prepared the 15% concept plans for the 2 protected intersections. You can see a colorful concept plan for the one at Beaver and Butler there on the screen. We're working on concept plans that would raise the bike lanes along Butler between Milton and Sawmill. And this would replace the current configuration of separated bike lanes that we have, the separation by curb stop and a vertical delineator. And you can see that again in that image in the lower right, what that would look like. This part of what we'll get is kind of constructability analysis of feasibility, review, concept plans, as well as preliminary cost estimate, which gives us a lot of good information to move forward with a grant, should that become available and this be a good candidate project. So go on to the next slide. So here, the rest of it, we break out the budget and the capital by categories, general facility types. So here's foots trails. In next budget year, we've asked for money for asphalt repair, foot signing, single track trails that provide forest access, and then a couple of medium to bigger projects, including the Schweitzer Canyon Trail in the middle of town, the Fox Glen Trail over towards Little America and Juniper Point in the east side of town, and the Sinclair Ridge Trail, which is a small connection to D. Miguel School. And just to touch on the asphalt repair, we have, I believe, 9 miles of asphalt foots trails, which some of which are in desperate need of resurfacing or repair. So we're starting to put some money aside to be able to do that. At some point, we don't have it yet, but we'll take a look at them individually and prioritize which ones should go first based on condition and how important they are and how well they're used. So next slide. Sidewalks, we have a couple of projects, sidewalks along the east side of 4th Street. The sidewalks along Yale is money that we're giving to the Butler University project to include as part of the overall project, but build where sidewalks are missing in that little section north of there. And then we've got some money set aside for infill sidewalks, which are typically short sections, less than 100 feet between other existing sidewalks. And in the last couple of years, we've given money to the road repair and street safety project, which is redoing a number of streets, and they use their designer and contractor to do these sidewalk projects. And it has proven to be a fairly easy way for us to manage it and kind of effective way to get missing sidewalks built, short sections of missing sidewalks. And I think that this doesn't look like a lot for sidewalks, but when we get to a later slide, we'll see that a lot of sidewalks are planned under the first mile, last mile portion of the funding. So I'll go ahead and on to the next one. So here's both enhanced crossings and grade separated crossings. For next year, we have enhanced crossing at Butler Avenue and O'Leary. And for grade separated crossings, we have money set aside for the Florence Walnut Underpass as part of the downtown mile. And then a potential underpass under New Lone Tree Road that would be built as part of the development of Juniper Point. So we have the road's going to go over the wash. We have a trail planned along the wash, and this is our opportunity to provide a tunnel for that trail instead of requiring users to cross at grade. And go on to the next slide. Bikeways is similar to sidewalks in that a lot of what we're doing is covered under first mile, last mile. But what we have included in the budget is some miscellaneous striping that's not included, not covered in first mile, last mile, spot improvements, and then signing for bike routes around town, which really isn't a facility. It's more of a designation, but it helps with wayfinding and helps give us a more robust bikeway system. Yeah, next slide. And then here's the first mile, last mile. So we divided in the budget itself. There are only 2 categories. One is pedestrian projects and the other is bike projects. But here we're giving the council a little bit more detail on what the specific projects are under each one of those categories. And so, like I said before, we have a few more sidewalk projects planned that will be funded with first mile, last mile along Fort Valley Road, Lake Mary Road, Forest Meadows, University Avenue and Highland Mesa, Lakin and Steves on the east side, a short section of Beaver leading into the NoHo neighborhood, some missing pieces along Schweitzer Canyon, San Francisco Street, which is generally focused on the intersection by Schweitzer Canyon, and then missing sidewalks over at Huntington and Fanning, which is a project that would support access to some of the service agencies that are back in that area and some of their clients. And go on to the next slide. The other part is crossings. So we have a handful planned. Generally, these correspond to where we have transit stops. For example, the 5 along Solier would correspond directly to where there are transit stops. Some of these are beacon crossings. Other ones are just crossing islands or more kind of simplified or basic crossings, depending on what's needed and where they're located. And go on to the last category. So here's a little bit more robust project list for bikeways, including striping to add bike lanes, adding another stripe to make buffered bike lanes where we already have bike lanes, including treatments at intersections. So bicycle accommodation is kind of carried through the intersection. And then a handful of enhanced bikeway corridors that would include different kinds of typically paint or pavement markings to kind of highlight and call them out as individual corridors. And these generally correspond to where we've identified primary bikeways. And I don't know, that might be the last of the slides, but go on to see if there are any others in the ped bike category.
That's the last slide we have in this
Okay.
packet.
Okay.
That was our presentation, and that's kind of a preview of what we'll be doing at the retreat on Friday. I have a couple of notes for follow-ups, and I'll just send those to all the commissioners whatever you guys ask for. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Martin, for the presentation, run through that with us. At this point, we will open it up to any public comments, either online or in person. And I am not seeing any. With that, we will open up for discussion by the commission and just reminding the group the primary or the requested action of the commission is just providing feedback to staff. So there's not a vote or a decision necessarily on part of the commission. So with that, do we have any discussion or comments from the commission?
I would just repeat thanks for the presentation. It's great to see all the exciting opportunities for improving our transportation, both for cars and bikes and peds coming up in the next 5 years.
Okay, and I don't see any comments from commissioners online. So if that is.
Oh,
it,
I'm sorry. I was raising
Oh.
my hand. This is
Oh, I'm sorry
Commissioner
about
Mazza. No, it's okay. It's always clunky. This is a question for Jeff. So once you go through the I want to say the budget hearing, but the hearing with city council, then will you come back to the commission and give us an update as to where things stand before it gets to budget adoption timeframe?
We can definitely do that. I can put that on the June agenda, just a recap of if anything changed at the budget retreat. That would be no problem. And then we'll also have a printout by that time that maybe some of you are familiar with seeing, but it's the 5-year program. It's an Excel sheet. So yeah, we can put that on the agenda in June. That would be easy to do.
That'd
if
be
you're
great.
interested.
I think
Sure.
that'd be very helpful. And thank you for the presentation.
All right, I'll double check here and make sure I'm not missing anything else. Anybody else online? But it doesn't look like I am. So with that, looks like some exciting projects coming in Flagstaff in the next 5 years and beyond. So looking forward to seeing those. The next item on the agenda. Get to the right place here. Is City of Flagstaff Pedestrian Advisory Committee appointment.
Thank you. Martin will probably jump on this one as well, but this is 2 appointments to the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. We sent out a report, I think, on Monday with some recommendations. If you have any questions, or Martin, do you want to do a short presentation? Typically, we just answer any questions if you have of that report.
Okay, do we have any questions from the commissioners? seeing any online, none, there are none in the room. I am trying to open up my notes here with the names. Do you have can you remind me of the names, Jeff?
I did, I opened it up on
Okay.
on the screen here.
Great.
Oh, where's the right part? Is it in I think it's at the beginning. Was it in Martin, can you help us? Do you have a different report? This report doesn't have what I thought it would have in it. I may be looking at the wrong piece.
Yeah, give me just a second. I'll get it. I'll call it up for you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll stop sharing. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Is that visible?
Yes, thank you. So the recommended action from staff is approve the appointment to the Pedestrian Advisory Committee for term ending on July 24th, Nancy Hagerman, and on July 25th, Alex Junk. Are there any questions, comments? I think there were none. So with that, do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the appointment of Nancy Hagerman for a term ending July 2024 and Alexis Junk for July 2025.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Excellent. Thank you. Next, we'll move into old business. And the first item in old business is Beaver and Butler Pilot Bike Lanes Annual Update.
We are still waiting for Sam from Public Works. If
Okay.
it's okay with the commission, if we could reorder, we can jump ahead to the non-standard artistic crosswalk policy. Then we'll do the bike lanes, and if he's not here, we'll be fine. We'll do it without him, but we think he's coming.
Excellent.
Thank you.
This guy? Better? Good, thanks. My name is Reed Miller. I'm a transportation project manager. And I'm here to discuss the draft non-standard artistic crosswalk policy that was presented to you back in December of 2023 or 22. At that meeting, I did a PowerPoint presentation that discussed the policy, and we agreed at that meeting that I would reach out to the Beautification Commission and then come back to you with any requested changes by them and give you an opportunity as well to make any changes yourself. I thought it would be a good idea to go over the background from the PowerPoint presentation, not going over the whole thing. And then I have a couple of other things in that presentation to use as a tool to show you the proposed changes. Oh, there we go. So look at the screen. The non-standard artistic crosswalks incorporate designs or multicolored treatments between the existing white lines of marked crosswalks. The city has received requests to add artistic features to existing crosswalks. However, these requests do not adhere to the Federal Highway Administration Uniform Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. Let's go to the next screen. So the purpose of the policy is to allow the installation of these non-standard crosswalks while providing requirements for its design and maintenance that do not compromise safety. So when we went to the commission, and let's go to the design slide on here, the city had proposed that since we would be maintaining the white portion or the high visibility portion of the crosswalk, we were proposing that there be a 2-inch black margin gap between the crosswalk markings and any of the artistic design elements. And the beautification committee requested that we would do away with that requirement in exchange for them maintaining the entire crosswalk. So we've agreed to do that, and I've made changes to the policy, which I can share with you. Now I've got that open, but that doesn't mean that's up on the screen. You're gonna have to do that. All right. It's shown in track changes, so. So it previously read, the design must be within the gaps between the white standard markings. The design must include a 2-inch black margin gap between the standard crosswalk markings and any design elements, and we're just scrapping that. And then scroll down a little bit more, Jeff. And then it spells out who's responsible for the maintenance. The applicant, not the city, shall be responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of the high visibility crosswalk, also the 12-inch border, and the upkeep and maintenance of the non-standard crosswalk design portions. So again, we're changing the way we had the policy written to adhere to the request of the Beautification Commission. And we're ready to move forward with this, and short of having any other comments from the commission or anyone else, and then we'll be going to council with this at the latter part of this month. Any questions?
Thank you. Commissioner Dunham?
Thank you, Vice Chair Hansen. Thank you, Reed, for the presentation and the background. And can you clarify that the Beautification Commission, like on that last slide, they said where it said the design shall versus not, was that after you discussed, that was their feedback at the time? I'm just
Yes,
trying.
they really wanted us to get rid of the 2-inch black gap. And we needed that so that it would be easier for us to maintain the white portion of the crosswalk. They said, well, how about if we maintain it and then we get rid of the 2-inch black gap? So we agreed to do that.
Great. Sounds like a great.
Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay.
Great compromise. So maybe one more follow-up related to maintenance, and it sounds like the draft agreement is, moving in this direction. Just a point of clarification is the city, how does the beautification commission group know when they need to do the maintenance?
That's also written in the policy.
That's great. I just wanted to, that was
It's
more of a
going to be the
practical
city's
question.
responsibility to notify the applicant when there are issues with either their design, the artistic portion of the crosswalk, or the city's portion of the crosswalk. It'll be, the city will notify them when they need to get out and maintain them.
Great, thank you.
I
Yeah.
had a question too, just thinking along the process and the what if scenarios if those aren't maintained. I mean, have you thought about that process if there's an issue with that?
Yes, if they elect to not continue to maintain them, the policy is also includes a provision for them the city to notify them, and it'd be up to them at their expense to remove the artistic crosswalks, and then they would just be returned back to a standard crosswalk marking.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Koenig?
I guess the one concern I have with that is, let's say a crosswalk out there is chipped and is degrading, and we notify them, and it takes a month before they get back to us and say, oh, maybe we'll do it, and another month and they don't do it. At what point does the city do it and fix it, and then who pays for that? Do we bill them? Are we actually able to get that money back, or is the city just out all of a sudden for some chunk of money?
I don't think we would go in and touch up the artistic portion, but certainly we would probably be proactive and go out and upgrade or bring back to the standard the white portion, and then deal with the other matter. I'm not sure how we would handle that.
Okay, but the city would go ahead and make sure the white portion was dealt with in a
Yes.
timely manner regardless.
Right.
And we're anticipating, especially early, these are going to be, it's pretty darn expensive to do this. And so the initial conversations have been that the applicant's typically going to be the city. It's going to be the Beautification and Public Arts Commission is going to do these in probably all cases, just because it's so expensive to install and maintain. So the applicant is actually the city. It's just not city transportation. It's a
So hold
different
on,
group.
so the city's actually gonna pay for all this stuff as well?
The Beautification and
Most
Public
likely.
Arts Commission has a budget for public art, and they're pretty excited about this opportunity. So yeah, it'll be, yes,
Okay.
it'll be pretty much all city on all sides, though it is written that it could be somebody else. But I mean, these will be, I mean, we maintain crosswalks a lot, and we put our white lines so that the wheels don't hit them, so they last a little longer. The art's gonna be right in the way of the wheels, so it's probably not gonna last much longer than a year. And these applications might easily be 10 grand a crosswalk. So it's not likely to be a community group or an HOA, it's just going to be really cost prohibitive. So yeah, there's a bit of a hole there, but we think it's going to work itself out pretty well. That help?
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. It looks like Commissioner Mazza has a comment or a question.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And that was everything in line with my questions about safety and visibility and repair maintenance. I'm still challenged with the why. There's so many other places for, beautification in this community. And, we've seen, what the weather has done to these crosswalks just, in the past 6 months. And, I struggle with the safety aspect of this, and any degradation of, the crosswalk itself. I know as part of the conversation, going back to the Beautification Commission, and please remind me, Jeff and Reed, has PD weighed in on this at all? From a safety perspective, from crossing perspective, a pedestrian perspective?
Was the question the police department?
Yes, I mean, yeah, from a safety perspective.
We have not engaged the police department on this one. Typically transportation engineering would be the kind of the authority on designs and crosswalk markings and locations. So we don't usually engage the police department on that kind of thing. And we didn't in this case. We've kept there's a number of things, but I hear you on the safety front. We're also very aware of that and paying attention to those concerns and paying attention to what other communities have done. And we put quite a bit of boundaries on this, guardrails, so that we think we're in a really good spot. So these crosswalks will continue to have our standard markings. So it's kind of like the picture in the bottom right, something like that. So you'll continue to have all of your normal white markings. They'll be maintained. And the big thing is these can only be installed at locations that already have stop traffic control. So we won't install any artistic crosswalks mid-block where we really need good visibility for pedestrians to be seen, for the crosswalk to be seen. These will be at locations that are traffic signals that have a red indication or stop signs where vehicles are already stopping. So the value or the need to have a really high quality, high visibility crosswalk is diminished in those locations.
Additionally, they're going to be on low volume streets with speed limits of 25 miles per hour.
Yeah, lots of guardrails here to keep these kind of low volume, low speed, thank you, stop control locations. We feel real good about what we've done with this thing so far. So, and Beautification Public Art was they're really excited about it, and they think they can find locations that meet these requirements, so they can put one of these out there or two of these out there and be real satisfied with the program on all fronts. So we feel like we're in a pretty good spot. We'll talk to council late this
Thank you.
month and we'll see. Thanks for the
Yeah,
questions, Erica.
absolutely. No, and thank you. And I really appreciate the amount of time and energy you all have put to this, seeming that it's something very simple. There's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of parameters to go with it, and I appreciate the guardrails that you put to this.
You're welcome.
Okay, at this time, we'll open it up for public comment. Are there any comments from the public online? I do not see any. The requested action is to review staff presentation and updated policy and make a recommendation to the city council. So I will open it back up to the commissioners for recommendations and to the city council and any further thoughts.
I guess I share some of the concerns that Erica has on this. I recognize that city staff has done quite a bit of work on this, and I recall in the presentation you provided last time that there were studies that have been done that haven't shown any increase in accidents due to these, and you've reviewed a number of other municipalities. My concern is that the average citizen, from what I can tell, doesn't observe traffic markings as it is, and they routinely pull through intersections, and they ignore red lights and make right turns on red lights all the time, and anything that will distract or contribute to any confusion around that, I don't think it makes any sense for the city to spend a bunch of money on something that's temporary, has the potential to cause confusion, and it has the potential to be a safety issue.
Commissioner Koenig, is your recommendation then to not approve the policy?
Yeah, my recommendation would be to not approve the policy. I was gonna leave it open for other comments if there were any, and then if not, I guess I can make a motion to not approve it if there's no other comments. Or I guess, do I make a motion first, then people comment on that?
Well, I would suggest maybe if we give an opportunity for the other commissioners to provide input, and then we can make a decision how to proceed from there.
Jeff, some clarification. Are you looking for guidance or a motion from us?
So it can go either way. We're going to the city council in a couple of weeks, and we will relay all the information we've received from you either way. So if it's a motion and some voting, we can bring that to them. It's not necessary with this item to have a vote, but so we can also just go through everybody's comments. We can kind of summarize at the end where the commission stands and we'll probably add a slide or two to the presentation to just relay the information that you provide us. So does that help process-wise?
Yeah, that absolutely helps. And if I
Okay.
recall, maybe not the original conversation on this, but one of my first opportunities to be involved in this conversation, I understood that this particular question about artistic crosswalks came from a city council member or the mayor themselves. So I believe it's going back to the same folks.
The request was the request was from the previous mayor, and we just didn't make it through the program in time for him to be still seated. But the request was from the mayor. It's called a future agenda item request process. And so, it's worked its way through the system and back through the Transportation Commission. And so that's why this has come forward, because the mayor asked us to talk about this.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. Is there a current advocate for this that is still in the loop from the Beautification Commission, or however that works? Or is this still just kind of working it through our process?
Yeah, so when we get a fair item, we run those all the way back to council, no matter if the council's changed or not. So that is still active. And then as a part of this process, or maybe because of this process, I'm not quite sure, Beautification and Public Arts Commission got interested in it. So again, we presented to them about a month and a half ago, and they are very interested. I think they've even, I bet they've put it in their budget. So at the retreat on Friday, there'll probably be a line item for an application for this program. So yeah, they're kind of all in at this point.
Thanks.
Yep.
Looks like Ryan Turley is offering some input from the police department. We would love to hear from you.
Hi, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Commission. My name's Ryan Turley. I'm a lieutenant for the Flagstaff Police Department. A little about me is I'm the commander of the collision reconstruction team. So what that means in lay terms, if there's a serious injury, accident, or fatality, we're called out to use mathematical formulations to try to reconstruct the collision, or to see how fast a party was going, to see what happened, and we're able to present it in court if we need to. For this, we would not support it. Anything that's distracting is cause for concern with pedestrians crossing the road, especially in nighttime hours. If you had looked at some of the photos that were shown in the presentation, there's white lines that are mandated, but it's blocked out by multicolors. So we're getting rid of the white lines to help see the pedestrian. Why they're white is so we can see, one, to mark the lane, but it helps see the pedestrian, especially in low light conditions. If there's other colors there that are distracting or that could camouflage someone, that's going to be a concern for anyone using that walk. So we would not support this. And I can answer any of the questions you may have. And thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Lieutenant Turley. Any other thoughts from the commission?
Yeah, I think, I would be in agreement with, some of the conversation points that have been going on so far. I think there are so many other opportunities for beautification in the community. And, Commissioner Mazza, to your point, it's been a harsh winter. I don't anticipate these, beautiful murals, as beautiful as they may be in June, to last the season. And just walking here, I had a couple of near misses as a pedestrian and crosswalks. Is this adding to the distractions that we are seeing across the board? So I would just like to add my voice, Commissioner Koenig, to your comments as well.
Yeah, I think,
This is Commissioner Mazza again. Oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Okay. So I really appreciate our police representative speaking up on this matter. And, I really want to make sure that those comments can get carried to council. I think they're important comments to be delivered to council. And, for that, I appreciate that we are just, talking about our thoughts on this. And, I don't necessarily feel that this group needs to make a full recommendation, but just, we've heard a lot about this beautification opportunity. And I think if we can bring forward the comments like we're doing right now, then that will hopefully give council all the information that they need to make the decision that is before them in the next couple of weeks. But I really appreciate the feedback, and I had a feeling. So again, thank you for the comments.
Thank you, Commissioner. If there are no other comments from the commission, try to summarize this for our recommendation. It sounds like the primary concerns with the art in the crosswalk is going to be the cost of maintenance, essentially long-term commitment by the city, potential for that, knowing that the applicant is responsible for the cost of maintaining, but concerns with implications down the road. Safety being a distraction to drivers, and safety concerns for pedestrians and other vehicles. And hearing the comments that is primarily the feedback from the commission is of concern with respect to primarily the safety, with consideration for maintenance and follow through by the applicant. Is that a fair summary? Okay.
So in general, would we characterize this as it's not a good idea, or it is a good idea with more guardrails? Sorry to put you on the spot. a
Oh,
little,
that's all
but
right. It's all right.
It'd be good for us just to make sure we're delivering. I mean, we can ask, the chair can attend the city
Mhm.
council meeting and relay this information in person, but you don't have to. We can do it for you if we're real clear. So I mean, I'm kind of hearing maybe we're not in favor, the commission is really not in favor of this at this time. I mean, all the comments are fairly negative, so I just want to make sure
Mhm.
if we say commission's generally not in favor of this moving forward, you're comfortable with that?
I
as a
think
group?
the question to the commission as well, with the guardrails that are in place, the speed limit and the type of intersections that it's going to be placed at, are there, adjustments to that where the commission would be, where the concerns would be somewhat reduced or alleviated? Or is it a blanket at every crosswalk, every intersection, that the safety concerns is maintained? Is that another way of
Yeah.
not saying as well as you did? What
Well,
you're-
no, I mean, no, you're great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there some additional information you'd like us to add or recommend to add to this, or we've taken as far as we can? I mean, 25 is our lowest speed limit. Stop control is the highest level control or signal. So I don't know that there's more we can do to reduce the locations and make them the least likely to have conflicts. I think we've done a good job of that part.
I think those guardrails are kind of putting our opinion, though, forward, that it's probably not the best idea from a transportation perspective to do this. I mean, I haven't really stopped to ask. You've done great work putting together a recommended policy position, but what is your feedback as transportation engineers and professionals in moving forward or not moving forward? I would love to take that into account also as a commissioner.
Yeah, with the guardrails, we're comfortable at this point from talking to other cities, looking at what other cities' policies have been. There is some momentum, I don't know how much, but there is some momentum to kind of try to formalize this on a federal level, something, who knows where it'll end up, and it'll probably take 10 years to get done. But there is more momentum to make this kind of thing more formal than to not at this point. All those things kind of have weighed into, this is going to be what we've done. We're comfortable with, but that shouldn't, I mean, it sways you a little, hopefully, but you're on your own. So, I mean, you have your own opinions. That's why we have, a group of citizens to do this. So.
Well, I appreciate that. And we can push this to the city council to actually make the decision on whether this policy goes forward or not. I think with those recommendations, I think we have concerns. I think we have reservations, but given the work that transportation staff has done, I think that's all for council at this point to make a final decision.
It is.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and I think that my opinion is hearing the concerns over the safety, especially appreciate the input from the police department, and then hearing Jeff's input from an engineering standpoint. I think that I have the same concerns, but maybe they're not to the point where I would recommend not doing it. I think it's something to be aware of, and having the guardrails in place, hearing the request from council and from members of the public in the past. And I think it's a reasonable request. I mean, there's always concerns when you change something or modify or doing it in a different way, that there's always an opportunity for it to disrupt what the expectations would be for drivers or pedestrians. But my opinion is that I think with the guardrails in place and understanding the type of intersections that it would be that these artistic features would be installed at, I'm in favor of recommending that it is approved to council. That's my personal, but obviously the voice of the commission.
I think we have what we need, I think. I mean, we'll just, yeah, spell it out that it's a bit of a mixed reaction, you know, we're kind of, yeah, we got it from here.
Okay.
Unless you have more, but I think I've got the gist of it. I've got good notes. Reed will deliver the message. Now he's gonna ask me to do it.
Was that
I
a
will.
management week?
I really do appreciate the discussion we've had, you know.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah,
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for all the work on putting this together.
you're welcome.
All right, our next item on the agenda is the Beaver and Butler Pilot Bike Lanes annual update.
Uh, All right, cool. Chair Hansen, commissioners, thank you for having me. My name's David Lemke. I'm the transportation associate here at the city. And today I'll be giving you the presentation on the separated bicycle lanes on Butler and Beaver. Okay, so a little bit of background, because I realize some commissioners are new and might not be as familiar with this project. Council recommended separated bike lanes in July 2021 after the concept was proposed by a citizen petition. The separated bike lanes were completed in November 2021 so just a few months later. It was a very quick project, or they did it very fast, which was a good thing in some ways. You know, like they moved very fast to get the project completed. And here's a map of kind of the boundaries of the project. It started on Forest and Beaver to the north, all the way down to Butler Avenue, and the separated lanes are not the whole stretch of Beaver. Sometimes it's just paint, but they were in the middle here from Forest all the way down to Cherry, I believe. And then Butler started at Milton and Butler and ran all the way to Sawmill. And there's plans, this dotted line is in the future to extend these out to, I believe that's Babbitt in the future, but that's just for the background. For more background, we evaluated the separated bicycle lanes and brought conclusions and recommendations to council in June 2022. We considered speeds, bicycle vehicle volumes, crashes, a community survey, maintenance costs and concerns, and stakeholder inputs when we evaluated the bike lanes. And once we had all that data, we brought that to the commission and to council, I believe. And we recommended, based on all that feedback, that the bike lanes be removed and replaced with a painted bike buffer in June 2022. But council directed us at the time to collect a full year of data for the bike lanes in order to make a more informed decision at a later date. And so that brings us to today, where I'll kind of show you our new information that we have. And at least for the Transportation Commission, you kind of see it for yourself and kind of maybe make a recommendation on how we should go forward. So this presentation, like I said, will provide the updates on maintenance costs, bicycle volumes, crash statistics for Beaver and Butler separated bike lanes since the last update. And we will also make recommendations on this. And in a few slides, I'll also get help from our Public Works Director, Sam Beckett. He's going to help me out with some slides, but for now, I'll keep going. So, or actually, Sam, did you want to start here with the past conditions? Okay, I'll keep going, yeah. So these are the past conditions when we initially put in the bicycle lanes at Beaver. And you see they're nice, clean and white, but we've found that as time has gone by with maintenance and the cinders and just being struck by vehicles, that the quality of the barriers has degraded. And so you can see they get struck, they crumble, cinders kind of collect within and on the sides of the bike lanes. Here's another example from Butler, the previous conditions when they were first installed versus the conditions today where they've taken some damage from vehicles and from snow plows and things like that. And so that brings me to winter maintenance. And in order to prevent large amounts of snow from being pushed into the separated bike lanes, snow is plowed into the median along the Butler Avenue, which is different than how it usually is. And this led to the landscaping sustaining damage and also excessive lane narrowing along Butler, which is not that safe and kind of makes more dangerous conditions for the vehicles. And left turn lanes along the route were also buried in snow and inoperable. And so we have a diagram on the bottom left, which shows how the snow is piled, and then some pictures we took of the snow conditions this winter. And now I believe this brings me to Sam's slide, so I'm going to hand it off to him. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Sorry we had to rearrange the agenda tonight. I apologize for that, but I appreciate the time. I think tonight I want to note before we get into this, by no means was this intended to be a negative conversation. What I really want to focus on here is truly what happened operationally. We're going to just walk through those bullet points, discuss what we saw. I'd love to talk about all the stuff that went well, but frankly, it was a pretty rough winter, and this infrastructure just didn't really help us any at all. So it was just one of those pieces. We'll work through the pieces, the talking points, and talk about some of the struggles we had, some of the things that we learned from this. I think we've gained a lot of good data from it, so we'll hit on all that. As we go through, we'll start off with some of these struggles with plowing operations. What we found was last year we had to purchase special equipment to fit within the curb of the new infrastructure and the current curb and gutter. There was only a few pieces of equipment, and actually it really narrowed down to one piece of equipment that would fit in there and to a point where we could actually functionally use it. And we purchased 2 of the Bobcat tool cats. It was a $160,000 investment with snow blowers and buckets to try and clear the infrastructure. What we learned fairly quickly is the amount of vehicle strikes that these curbs get, they truly disintegrate. We lost one of our snow blowers simply due to sucking in a chunk of the separated bike lane curb, and it is currently down to this date. So what you'll see, and it's tough to see it in the picture to the right, on the top right, is we actually run tandem snow operations in the infrastructure. So we'll run the snow blower up front, and as they see some kind of any imperfections or potential damaged curb, the secondary plow will come up with a bucket, remove the busted curb, and then we have to have somebody come back, and it's been our snow shift supervisors to come back out and hand remove the rebar holding them in place. And it's actually been fairly difficult because we can't leave the rebar without the curbing. So we ran into some unique challenges there. One of the other pieces as we look through, or as we talk through the bullet points here, one piece that we overlooked drastically was the lane narrowing. And what happened here in snow operations was the operators are trying to judge the toe of their plow or the nose, the leading edge of their plow as they're plowing to the middle of the road against that infrastructure. Well, as you make those corners in tight areas, you just can't get close enough to those curbs. And honestly, a couple times we got a couple inches too close. So I'll admit we've taken a few out ourselves. What we found was while they were straddling the center line, if you will, between the two lanes, vehicles would continue to pass them, which was interesting. We haven't seen that historically in most of our plow operations, and realistically, we didn't see it along Beaver Street nearly as much. I think it's because of the one-ways up there, even along the areas around the hospital, I think because of the divided median, but we had a lot more issues with that along Butler, and we ran into several incidents where frankly, we probably should have collided with vehicles, and they didn't, but it put our drivers in a really, really terrible spot. The picture you see in the bottom right corner there is an area where we're now seeing water ponding that we haven't seen before. The infrastructure is holding water in areas where it's shaded, and it's freezing and it's just staying there. What we're seeing is a huge runoff from the center of the road back to the shoulders where the water's trying to get to its drainage infrastructure. This also led to an uptick in cinders. We are estimating we used about 200 cubic yards of additional cinders this winter alone over what we would have normally done off of a singular storm. So it went up exponentially. And realistically, that was mostly along the Butler corridor for whatever reason. That one was the one we saw most of the icy conditions. Yeah, I think that's kind of the bulk of this slide. When we talk about what we had to do, this is a great picture here. Unfortunately, this is our snow shift supervisor, and that's what it had to be. We couldn't take operators out of vehicles to go out and work on this infrastructure. So as they would pull the curbs, honestly, you didn't see it here, but our administrative assistant is actually holding the curb balanced over off to the side, Bailey Shotina, while Greg's trying to remove the rebar from the road during one of the snow events. This here, I hit on it earlier, is a brief explanation of what we had to do in transition for snowplow operations. This was fairly difficult this year just because of the huge uptick in snow that we saw. And while I'd love to say that this was just an extreme year and totally abnormal, we're not that far over our winter average, which is an interesting fact. So if we're getting average winters, unfortunately, we're going to see consistent impacts. Since January 1, we've removed 67 of the curbing along this infrastructure just simply because it was destroyed. And those are most of the pieces we have. It's a fairly impressive pile of shattered curb that we haven't been able to replace. And unfortunately, most of that curbing has been curbing that had the initial marking on it. So it was the leading edge as you would drive into the curbs there. So we couldn't get back in there in time to get new markings in. So it's just this trickle down effect. The interesting nuance that we found and we had to figure out how do we time this better was Parks and Rec is out there doing exactly what we're trying to do is clear infrastructure, working on multimodal infrastructure, trying to get sidewalks clear. We would plow the bike lanes. They would come along and plow the sidewalks in the areas where they maintain them, mainly along Butler. It just pushed it right back into the bike lanes. So what we found is we came to a kind of a critical point where we had to stop, take a tactical pause and say, how do we align this better? We did our best to align it, but it's almost impossible with the way that the operations work. So we're still working on that coordination piece and we're hoping to get better moving forward. But those were some of the struggles on that. The roadway edge visibility, I think we talked about that, hit on that earlier, but as you can see here, this was one of our operations that we were attempting to do at one point, which was putting the narrow tires on the Bobcat and running that snow blower, and then you have to use a truck or something to buffer that so you're not throwing snow directly into the path of traffic. So timing on this was key. One of the big pieces we learned is we were asked initially to treat this as a priority snow route. Well, under our standards and under our policies, priority snow routes are to remain open and passable at all times. We've learned that we cannot keep this infrastructure at a priority route. We will not be able to support that. We know it was an ask and not necessarily in the direction, but we attempted it. We did the best we could, and honestly, crews did a phenomenal job trying to keep this open this winter. Curb failures, sidewalks, and then the dangerously narrow roads. I want to emphasize that more for our operations team. I don't want to speak for the public. They may have felt that it was completely fine and that they were able to move through there. Unfortunately, from an operations standpoint, our equipment is much larger than the average vehicle. Those plows are averaging between 10 to 12 feet, depending on the plow and the truck. That motor grader has a 14-foot moldboard on it. It takes up a lot of space. We had to start using an additional vehicle because of the amount of residential traffic or just normal traffic attempting to pass the snow operations. So now we had to continue to pull resources to support it. I think those are really the big tales of this. I'd love to tell you that this had more positive that came out of it. This is just the reality of what we dealt with. This is the seasonal update, if you will, from snow operations. We're going to continue to enhance and hone our operations here. The crews are constantly trying to find creative ways to be better on this and to get staff out there. But frankly, it's challenging at best. So we're going to keep pushing and do our best to keep up with it. But I think some of the data here is more important than the story told from operations. So I'll give it back over to David.
Excellent. Thank you, Sam. Really appreciate that. So yeah, picking up from there, this table we're looking at now is a breakdown of the costs. And so the first column is a one-time expenses, which I did put one time, but some of them have not necessarily been just at the beginning. They've been throughout the project. Like installing new delineators happened after they were installed, of course. So it's not exactly at the beginning, but they were a one-time purchase. And so, for example, with the installations, pavement markings, and so on, that put us at $1 million. And then the next one is like kind of maintenance costs of the project. So the first season that was up, it had us at 51,000. And then this past winter, with the snow being as it was, you saw a big increase in snow operations from 21,000 to 53,000, almost more than doubling. And that put us at 89,000. So with a grand total of $1,171,566. So that's just a breakdown of the costs. And now I kind of want to look at bicycle volumes. So in the past, the way this breaks down is we did our initial bike counts in October of 2021, and that was before the bike lanes were installed, and that's in gray. And then orange, we took bike counts in April after they were installed in the spring. And so just looking at those two data points, you can see at some points it was even more bicycles riding than before than after they were installed. In other cases, there's more bikes riding once they were installed, like on Beaver. And then this last time we did counts in March, we did have a lower number than bicycles than any other times. Of course, the weather has been tough, and we took this at a time last week when the weather was nice, but it still might be a while for the bikes to get out. So that might not be indicative, but this is just a snapshot of the bicycle volumes. And then this brings me to crashes. And so it's good to kind of keep these in mind. I'm first going to look at per year crashes. So the total since 2012, how many crashes have occurred along like the boundaries of this project on Butler and on Beaver. And you can see on Butler, there's usually an average of 52 crashes a year, 2.1 bike crashes a year and 1.3 ped crashes a year. And on Beaver, there's significantly less, 12 crashes on average per year, less than one bike crashes and less than one pedestrian crashes, just to give you an idea of the history of crashes on these roads. And that brings me to the time period since they've been installed. Like we only have data updated on the Arizona Crash Information System until June 2022. That's the most up-to-date data we can get. And so I looked at a time frame of data from December to June since 2012, because since the bike lanes were installed in November, like December is the next month where it's like they're operational. So I thought that'd be a good snapshot. And as you can see, this is for Butler and Beaver. You do see an increase in crashes when you get to December and June. Like for Butler, the average was around 28, 29, and this in December and June, this was last winter, it almost doubled to 49 crashes instead of 28, 29. And I also broke down by ped and bike. So there weren't as many ped and bike crashes, but there were a lot more vehicle crashes. Beaver Street was about the same, so there wasn't as much of an effect. And so if we dive deeper into the Butler crashes, if we look at injuries, there weren't an increase in injury types, especially suspected serious and fatal. But overall, no injury crashes. There was a large uptick. So you can see the average, usually there's an average of 27 on Butler, but that jumped up to 49. And the no injury crashes doubled. And so that brings us to this graphic, which kind of gives you a visual of just from December to June, from the past to now, kind of how it's changed. And this is also a visual of the bike and ped crashes. And as you can see, that's kind of held constant. There were a few more in 2020, 2021, but on average is about 1 to 2 a year. And then brings us to our recommendations. So due to the challenges posed by cinders and snow operations, or just the snow season in general, and we recommend removing the separated bike lanes on both Beaver Street and Butler Avenue and replacing them with a buffered bike lane instead. The increases in crashes along Butler Avenue shows the bike lanes are creating safety concerns for drivers along the roadway. And when reviewing other agencies that use similar bike lanes with similar climates, we found that salt was commonly used to help mitigate like the buildup of snow and ice. And that's not really an option in Flagstaff. We've, at least for the city, been directed not to use salt and instead use cinders. So that just adds to kind of the challenges of the maintenance. And finally, here's an example of what we'd recommend besides the separate bike lanes is to do a buffer, a painted buffer along these roadways. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. Thank you so much. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, David. Thank you, Sam, for the presentation, all the information and data. With that, I think we'll see if there's any questions from the commission and then go into public comment. So any commissioners with questions or comments?
I think at first glance, we have, as a commission, and as a city, a community, a philosophical point to address, you know, and so far as moving forward versus backwards. I can certainly respect it was a challenging winter season with snow removal with a physical barrier. I think the 49 crashes or 47 crashes you saw, we minus those pedestrian and bicycle involved crashes, those are cars. Those are cars hitting barriers. So we're seeing vehicle behavior is what we're seeing, right?
So that's a good point. There were some that were curbs. They were like listed as curbs, but then there was others that was just between vehicles.
My point being that we would generally not see a number of those who cross a paint line. We will see those who collide with a curb in some cases, especially if there's damage to a vehicle or property. So I just want to be real sure that we're taking into consideration that we're seeing vehicle behavior here. And I certainly appreciate that, you know, modification of practices for snow removal and for cars navigating a road that now has a physical barrier to protect bicycles and pedestrians is going to be a learning curve. And we're, you know, in the midst of a pilot, and I think we're learning some great things. And I would love to take back what we're learning from operations staff, you know, because that's a headache, absolutely a headache. But what can we do to better support infrastructure development that's going to support both bicyclists in the community as well as snow operations? Because I'm hearing that was a big allotment of time and resources, and we can do better on both sides.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments from the commission? Commissioner Koenig?
I've got some questions. Yeah, thanks Sam and thanks David. It's been a challenging winter, and I can imagine and I can see these things are a pain to deal with. One of my questions is around the Bobcat toolcats. Are those generally useful for other things? I know we have them listed in here as like one-time expenses, but I wasn't curious if in general they'll be helpful for other things as well.
So I think the interesting thing to note here is, you know, the smaller equipment is not really what Public Works does. This program is housed out of streets. It's frankly borderline ineligible for our HERF funding. So we're really on this borderline funding restriction on what we can and can't do. So our goal was to utilize that in other places. What we found is that while they're an awesome piece of machinery and we're trying to utilize them for every possible task we can, they're also fairly limited in comparison to a normal bobcat or, you know, a skid steer. We've already had, just from plow operations, 2 different arms bent on the front operations, and it was just moving a snowblower. So we're learning that they're more of a light duty heavy piece of equipment rather than a heavy duty piece of equipment. So there are some challenges with that. We tried using them for flood mitigation work last year. They weren't strong enough to pick up a pallet of sandbags. So it was just, it became challenging. We actually blew out a front spring and coil over on it to trying it. So we're testing it. but we're investing a lot in the testing process. So, yeah, we're trying to better utilize them in other places, but frankly, these smaller operations, which unfortunately that's what this is really not the wheelhouse of what we try and do. But ultimately, we're giving it our best to keep it moving forward. And I think there were some great comments here tonight, and I also want to note that I do think we need to find some better ways to support our bicycling community. I don't know what that is. But I also want to make sure we're investing in the right resources and the right infrastructure that truly supports everyone to get us there. So, we're doing our best, and happy to answer any other questions.
Yeah, I have, I think this winter was tough, not just for bike lanes, but for sidewalks, both on, commercial property and city properties and private properties all around Flagstaff. Based on what we've learned here, I think we saw in the previous presentation, there was a teaser about the possibility of making some improvements and extending the bike lanes or extending the sidewalks and raising the bike lanes on Butler. And can you comment on how that would work with plowing, whether that would be easier and like how we're going to address the issue with snow removal with the new plan?
So so when we move the infrastructure is what it would be, it would still, in a sense, narrow up the roadway. It wouldn't narrow it up to the point where we currently are. The pieces that we're dealing with now we have this kind of no man's land in between the curbing and the curb and gutter, where we're getting weird impacts. We're getting overlap of cinders in there, things that we can't control, we can't clean up easily. When we get ice buildup in there, I have nothing that can get in there and take it out. The Bobcats, we've attempted to do it with the bucket. It's too rigid. We don't have the right tools, and I don't know if there is a right tool to get in there and manage that infrastructure. If it was simply just managing the 2 lanes, we're just managing the 2 lanes. The snow will have to go somewhere. And it will wind up most likely up on the edge of that sidewalk. But if the sidewalk was twice the width of what it was, we would have to talk that through with Parks and Rec. We're currently looking at these options as we look at the new corridor for the Lone Tree overpass. There's that section that ties into that would move and increase the width of that sidewalk more to like a foot's path in a sense, where that could potentially be it. But I also think that they're putting a green belt buffer in there to help with snow storage as they do that. So they're trying to design it to what the operations are going to need. So it's not that we're not challenging that moving forward. So I think the intent is right moving forward, but we also have to figure out what do we do with the current infrastructure and figure out where that goes. I can no longer invest in that. I didn't invest in the beginning, but just figuring out how do we invest in the right tools. And one of the things I brought up with Jeff as we talked through it is, as a pilot, so far we've only tested one thing. I think it's important that we try maybe something else. How long do we test a single pilot? Even I think in one of our last council meetings, and one of our hugest advocates for this, while he was still on council, his last words on this were, "We know the infrastructure has failed," and unfortunately, he was right. In a sense, it doesn't work the way we want it to work, but I think it's important that we continue to try new pilots that could be successful.
David, you had mentioned this buffered bike lane, and you post a really great photo there of like a nice 3 or 4 foot wide buffer section. Can you go into detail of what exactly that would look like on both Butler and Beaver if it were implemented?
Yes, I can try. Because of course the cross section on Butler is not constant. It changes as you go along the road, but our plan would be to put, I believe, a 2-foot painted buffer next to the existing bike lane. And we would have to figure out the details on how that would change, like on the curves or stuff. But I believe, right, Jeff, 2 feet is our goal.
And so the inside of that 2 foot, would that be where the inside of that curb, that rigid curb is now that exists that we installed?
That's a good question. I believe the 2 feet would be from the edge of the bike lane, right, Jeff? Like we'd have the 4.5-foot bike lane, and then the buffer would be from that edge, from the edge of the bike lane.
Yeah, the dimensions actually on that road section change about every 100 feet. So dimensions are just kind of, yeah, generalized. But I think what we haven't worked on this yet completely, but I think that outside line that you see on the image would be similar placement to where the outside line is today. And then the space that the curb takes up roughly is the buffer. Because we made the bike lanes bigger inside of the buffered area because the curb is a hazard to a bike as well as it is to a car. So we moved it over and made the bike lane wider inside of the curb section. So the bike lane striping area would get, go back to probably where it was, which was 4.5 feet, depending on where you're at. And you'd have 2 feet. And again, that white line is going to be similar. So the travel lanes will stay, I think they'll be about where they are now for painted width.
Okay, and that's the same on Beaver as well then, or do we have more space on Beaver to be able to put a buffer in?
Beaver changes every block as well. And it does have more space though. I don't know what the dimensions would be there, but I think that we've said with a buffered, because we're looking at buffered bike lanes in a number of places around town. And 2 feet is what we're gonna shoot for as a minimum. We'll go for 3 if we can get it, but that's 3 is the big, 2 is the smallest. I would guess we could get to 3 on Beaver in some places, because it is quite large in a few blocks.
Oh, yeah, more.
All
Yeah,
right.
Nobody else has some as well.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, so I think data can really helpful for these kind of things, right? And I think it's great that we try and capture some of that data with some of these recordings. Can you go into detail about what it looks like to get that number that says 58 bicycles for the month of March?
Certainly. So when we collected the data, we had 2 different methods. One method for Beaver Street and one method for Butler. The first method was putting down pneumatic tubes on Beaver that are pressurized. So when a bicycle rides over them, it goes into the box and it counts them. And that one is for a longer duration of time. We put that on Beaver for 3 days last week and collected that data continuously. And then for Butler, because we only have that one bike counter, we put up a camera instead to capture the bicycles. So we put up a camera for 12 hours from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Last week. And then we manually go through and watch the video and count all the bikes that occur. And that was the same process we did for the previous counts as well.
Thanks. And so you did that for 3 days on Butler as well then?
On Butler, it was a single day for the camera. The pneumatic tubes were for 3 days. And then in the past, because it snowed last week, we had to take the pneumatic tubes out. But when the past counts, we were able to leave them down for a whole week and collect that data. Here, I'll go back to that slide. That'll be helpful. So in April 2022, we were able to put the bike counter down for longer. I can't remember when we bought that, if that was the same time, but I think we had it by then. But then in the past, like in October, we were doing cameras for both. So it is a smaller snippet of data than we would like, and that's why we bought the pneumatic tube counter to get more confidence in it. But just looking at the snippets that we have, it's not as encouraging as we would like it to be, or like to have as many riders as we would like to see out there for this infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, this March, while there were some sunny days, we got a couple of snowstorms still. And while Butler and Beaver might have been mostly clear, there's plenty of side streets that are not clear and it's dicey out there. And so I can see why people wouldn't be riding for those reasons more so than any others.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. I believe I see Commissioner Mazzo has her hand up.
Yes, thanks, Vice Chair. I appreciate it and I appreciate all the questions thus far. Just a couple comments before I kind of get into the meat of my thoughts. As we go forward with the presentation, I'm assuming this presentation is going to get to council at some point. I know that there was a statement made that we were about at average snowfall. Just did a quick Google search, and I think we are off by some 50 to 60 inches. And with the intensity of the way the storms came and with the amount of time that the snow stayed on the roads is very different than in the 20 years that I have lived here. And so I do think that this year has been particularly difficult. It certainly has been a bigger of an anomaly. So my recommendation is just be a little cautious with, that we are about at average, because I don't think that this was an average year. I also don't necessarily think that where we placed the protected bike lanes on a road corridor that is already very tight. It has a tremendous amount of curb cuts, and it also has fairly high volumes that we probably saw the best of what a protected bike lane could look like, with the candlesticks and, and the raised kind of protective barriers. I have been in many other snowy parts of the country and they have them, but not with the same conditions that we have on Butler per se. So I don't want to throw this concept out, because I do think that it could work. It might just need to work in a different location. So as you all are pointing out, the data is very important, and also very curious about the bike volumes, and am very interested to see how they might change as we thaw from this extended winter. The only other comment I have is I live with a bicyclist, a very avid bicyclist, and he has groused about these protected lanes, specifically on Butler, over and over and over again. So I would highly support finding other options, and I like the option that you had presented, that gives a little bit wider of a berth, but really does indicate that this is a bike lane. Not to be confused with other things and having cars having to realize that if they don't cut now, they're going to miss that one turn into Whole Foods. So I appreciate that we're going to continue exploring other options, especially on, a highly used corridor like Butler and Beaver. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments from the commission? Commissioner Deno?
Thank you. This is, so I'm here representing Mountain Line as an alternate here tonight. And I want to echo every, Commissioner Mazza, Commissioner Matt, sorry, I can't see your last name. But really everything that the commission's been saying about there it is. And the Public Works Director, Sam, here, just about the spirit and intent of this project makes total sense, right? We want to support cycling in our community. We also want to make sure we have a safe, corridor to move through, and really the Public Works have a reasonable way that they can keep them up, long-term sustainability of that from a financial and everything else perspective that we heard from. But so I do go back to kind of what Commissioner Mazza said, it doesn't look like the raised barriers worked well on Butler, but maybe there's another location in town. But I really think, big picture, it's always hard to retrofit a corridor. When you're starting tabula rasa, new corridors, newer, wider, where you have a wider right of way, you have probably many more opportunities that I believe the other commissioner alluded to about a shared, fully separated raised bike lane facility with a sidewalk. That's probably the ultimate, would be the ultimate goal if we had our, perfect world. So I think this whole project though really demonstrates how the different departments in the city really work together to try to address these community needs, and have really good data to provide some recommendations for the future facility development in Butler or other areas of town. So I would say from a Mountain Line perspective though, we have shared, again, like I just said, we're very supportive of bike infrastructure, first mile, last mile. But I would have to say our operations team bus drivers have found it challenging with the curbs, and you know, we're trying to move in and out. So yeah, there's definitely been some challenges, and I know the city worked with us to remove a few curbs so we could get in a little bit, you know, make the turn in and out to our bus stops, but it's definitely a challenge. And that's been noted, so I don't think that's new information here, but really looking at the bigger picture that this is, it's not a failed experiment if you've learned something and you're able to take that forward and make adjust plans accordingly in the future, right, for new infrastructure here or other locations in town. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll just offer a couple brief comments here, and then we can move into public comments. I think it's share the same perspective and the opinion of the commissioners here. I think everyone has similar thoughts and concerns. Same with Sam and David and Jeff, it sounds like. I think it's important to remember just high level in this pilot program and what we're trying to accomplish as a community, and that's facilities that are functional, safe, and usable for pedestrians, bicyclists, and the vehicles. And I think we're seeing some pretty good examples. I think this winter, even with it being above average snowfall, I think it's highlighted. It's been good to see in the pilot program to really just highlight the challenges, maybe that we wouldn't have the opportunity to see if it were a drier winter, and then get to realize maybe after a larger investment with more permanent improvements put in place, or even expanding the program to other areas. So I think that that's a positive, being able to see that in a really focused sense. We got to hear about the challenges from Public Works Department in the maintenance. I think that those are important to consider, not only from an operations and budgeting and resource planning, but also that play directly into essentially having bike lanes that were more or less not very usable with the ice. I know I wouldn't ride on them if they were full of ice and other obstacles. And then also seeing the effect that the separated bike lane had on the vehicle crashes on Butler in particular. Understanding that those are vehicle crashes, but also that it's a single data point, understanding that, so it could be somewhat of a statistical anomaly, but have to believe at some level that having the snow in the median and then the reduced travel lane, or at least feeling like it's a reduced travel lane. Maybe it's not reduced at all, but it certainly feels narrower through there with the snow, and having vehicles maybe with the snow and the bike lane having maybe, 1.5 actual travel lanes or 1 3/4. It definitely, I know I experienced it get pretty tight, and it wasn't even enough space for 2 people to travel through there, especially with ice and snow on the road. So creating some additional hazards as well. So I definitely support that it's and agree that I think that the pilot has been successful in a lot of aspects and regards. I like the idea of trying the painted separated bike lanes, and then even more so the idea of a wider sidewalk. So providing that separate. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'll wait for you to
Oh.
finish, but I was wondering if I was able to respond one more time before we move on to public comment, like once you're done.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So I think that those are good options down the road, as well as just keeping in consideration. I think that the transportation master plan addresses these items very well in future development in new areas. It's a lot easier to implement these things than in a built out area of the city that already has constraints on the physical space. So with that, David.
Thank you. That was very well summarized, very well done. I just wanted to make a few points before we moved on, or just emphasize a few things that even though we do recommend the separated, or not recommend the painted bike buffer, our goal, or like something we'd want to strive for, is that, like, raising it up to the level of the sidewalk. We think that would be a lot better on all fronts than the current separated bike lanes. And I also wanted to mention that the crash statistics that we've seen are from last winter. We don't have the crash statistics yet for this winter, and last winter was much more mild than this one. So we don't know yet what's going to be, but it could likely be that there's more crashes this winter than last. And I'd also like to say, just from a safety perspective, if we look historically at the crashes we've seen for bikes and peds specifically along this corridor, there's usually been around 1 to 2 or a year about, and that pattern's kind of maintained even after we put the bike lanes in. So if our goal is safety for the bicyclists, the bike lanes might not be the best choice. Like if we're looking for increasing the comfort for bicyclists, get people out and bike riding, maybe that's good. But from a safety perspective, they might not really be trying to achieve the goals we're trying to strive for. Just looking at the data. So those are just the points I wanted to say before we moved on.
Great, thank you. Unless there's any other comments from the commissioners, I know that there's some public comments ready. So if we
Well,
are,
just to clarify, we have a section of commission comments after public comment, correct?
yes, I think what we'd like to
Okay.
do is let the public make comments, and then if we can organize our thoughts to give recommendations for Jeff, then that would be the goal. Excellent. With that, public comment, and a reminder for public comments that there are 3 minutes available for comment. With that, we will start with Tyler. I know he's pressed for time and would like to add his thoughts.
Hi, this is Tyler Denham. Before I start my comments, I do apologize. Ironically, I'm out on my bike right now and just went through the Butler section. I joined late and didn't hear all the crash data. Did I catch it correctly that you saw no evidence of serious pedestrian and bicyclist injuries, but you did see an increase in the amount of vehicle crashes, like vehicles hitting the barriers?
Correct. Well, once the barriers were installed, we let me go to the correct data. So in this graphic, or in this table, for the red data from December 21st to June 22nd, we didn't see, oh man, I'm sorry, let me try to find the correct.
I can't see the slide anyways because I'm out on my bike.
Oh, I
got
you.
Phone. So if you could just verbally summarize.
Verbally, yes, absolutely. So I did say that we didn't see much of an increase after the bike lanes were installed of serious vehicle crashes. And as for serious ped and bike crashes, I would have to double check to get that number. I don't know it at this time for the serious bike and pedestrian crashes, but I don't believe there have been any since they were installed. I know there were some before, but I don't know since.
Okay, well, I'll dig into my comments now. So I ride along Butler daily. I don't drive, and I live in Southside, so I bike along Butler to get to work on 4th Street. And I also bike along Butler to get my groceries at Whole Foods. And I'll say for myself, I do feel much more comfortable with the barriers. I'm personally uncomfortable with the idea of simply removing them and painting the lane. From what you've said, you've seen a lot of like minor vehicle crashes where people are hitting the barrier. And in my mind, instead of hitting the barrier going forward, they're going to hit me. I just feel like a fatality is inevitable if there's not either some kind of barrier or a separation of the bikes and vehicles. That's inevitable that's going to happen, and I'd really rather it wasn't me. And I do want to make one other point. So I know there was a thing about counting the number of bicyclists using the infrastructure. I wanted to make a note that in other cities that have had they successfully shifted a lot of transportation over to bikes and pedestrians after building well-connected infrastructure, well-connected safe infrastructure. You don't see immediate jumps in the rates of people biking and walking in that infrastructure. It builds up over time. So I feel like doing a count for a single year right after putting in the infrastructure is kind of misleading. the count of people using it goes up over time and builds. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. Any other public comments? I don't see any more. So we will come back to the commission here, and the request is for this item. The review the report and presentation, provide feedback, especially related to the proposed recommendations to City Council regarding the current and future status of these pilot projects. So I'd like to hear from the commission on their thoughts on a recommendation. I think we've received recommendations. I mean, if you guys would like, I can go through my list here. I think there was a couple of them that was pretty clear on the recommendations, and if anybody would like to clarify or change, then we can approach it that way. Commissioner Koenig, I don't know that I actually was able to get a recommendation from your comments.
Sure. Well, I'd like the opportunity to provide some more comments. Yeah, I think this has been a great pilot, and it's been very interesting. And I think a lot of people have like the friction that it has caused on all sides has helped to highlight just how bad of a road Butler in particular is for cycling. And, similar to what Matt has said is that, like every one of these, I think last year there was a lot more comments from fire engines and a lot of other road users about, and there was also a survey that was taken last year with a lot of people being unhappy with them. And, every person who hits that curb didn't drive into the bike lane. And, it's really not fun riding in the bike lane, constantly seeing this high volume of traffic and wondering which one of them is going to be the one that's going to come over and take you out, and so I think that's been super helpful to have this to sort of put that in everybody's mind. And I appreciate the idea of buffered bike lanes, and I think I've seen them implemented in a lot of places really well. One of my concerns with doing buffered bike lanes here is that it's the same amount of space as we had before, and there's just a little more paint there, and like, is that really gonna, how will citizens react to that? Will that change drivers' behaviors or not? And it certainly doesn't have the same confidence knowing you have a solid concrete buffer there compared to some paint on the road. That being said, in the interest of, doing pilot studies and the amount of effort this has been and the priorities of the city and other places, I personally am supportive of removing at least the stuff on Butler. I'm not, the stuff on Beaver, I haven't heard as many concerns about, and I'd be fine leaving the material on Butler or on Beaver. And then making a recommendation to council to really look closely at the 15% design recommendations that are being shown for the changes to the Butler and Beaver intersections, and potentially doing raising the bike lane along those. If we're going to get rid of these, we want to make sure we get a new solution in there as quickly as we can. With one of the challenges always be, I see that one only goes to Lone Tree, and Butler keeps going past that. And as we just heard from Tyler, who commutes all the way to 4th Street, that's a pretty dicey section as well to be riding on all the time. So what other options do we have? If we're going to just do painted lanes, could we extend those painted buffered bike lanes past Sawmill for the rest of Butler? Yeah, so those are some of my thoughts.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. And absolutely, if any other commissioners would like to make additional comments as well, but I will continue through here. Commissioner Mazzo, I believe I heard previously, unless you have anything to add or it has changed, but that you were supportive of exploring other options in the pilot program, such as the buffered bike lanes. Is that accurate? Okay. Next up, Commissioner Dunno. I believe I heard that you were supportive of removing the raised bike lanes, the separated bike lanes, and in supportive of the separated painted bike lanes and long-term consideration towards having the expanded sidewalks to also um, facilitate the bicyclists.
Yes, with the qualification, I think Beaver they seem to be working for space. So going back to Commissioner Koenig's.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you online.
Sorry about
Thank
that.
you.
Yes, with maybe clarifying similar to Commissioner Koenig's where it's removed, the curbs are removed on Butler, but remain on Beaver. And with your comments, yes, about the future accommodating, what else can we do on Butler? But I also think the interim solution to do the painted lanes that they described earlier could be, if that's something we can do, straight up while these other longer term solutions are being worked on.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Eckhoff, I do not believe.
I can
captured
clarify my
yours.
thoughts.
You bet.
I think moving forward, I would not be in support of any removal without further planning. I agree that there's something that needs to be done, but without having some specific design, infrastructure discussion, I am not comfortable with making the call to remove separated bike lanes. I think they are doing exactly their job. That's why we're seeing the 45. We're keeping vehicles out of an area. That's not going to happen once we renew it or we remove them, and we're going to be having a different conversation. Hopefully not this year, but in the number of years that it could potentially take to design and remediate the issues that we're seeing. I'm concerned about those things. So I would not be in favor of removing the bike lanes, the protected bike lanes, without a plan going forward to support protected bicycle passage through either of those corridors. I think I'd really like to see a refinement of this pilot to apply to other corridors through town. And I understand the challenges, but again, that's my perspective.
And thank you. And just for clarification, Commissioner, and that does not include, you wouldn't include the separated bike lanes with striping only as plans that you would support the removal for?
Not necessarily. I think if there's an option to do painted lanes with some sort of, some sort of barrier, whether they're, annoying markers or something that a car knows that they are departing from a passage from a lane of a vehicle lane. I think that the removal is going to revert us back to the reason we saw citizen petition come forth in the first place of putting bicyclists in harm's way.
I'm just curious, can we get hey Jeff, how do you guys feel about rumble strips on city streets?
I don't know that we don't use rumble strips because they're low speed streets and those are typically for rural, but I understand the point here. You usually get a lot of complaints when you put rumble strips in because cars bump them and all the residents that live nearby hear it all night long. So I understand the concept, but I would not recommend that in this location. We have tried, now that I have the mic, we have tried vertical delineators to separate the bike lane from the road, and they're wiped out in days. So that's why we went with the curbs in this location, much more substantial. So yeah, we've actually tried several of these things leading up to this pilot. So anyways, I'll stop talking, but yeah, I wouldn't recommend rumble strips in an urban area. Lots of complaints.
The issue of, in the interest of pilots, based off Matt's comment, one thing that would be interesting would be maybe not on the more urban area, the more residential area of Beaver, but by Sawmill or something like that, or rumble strip. Because I share his concern that paint is just paint, and we certainly can't do like positive bump things, but rumble strips seem like they could be both amenable to being plowed over as well as let cars know that they shouldn't be there too.
It could, yeah, it's something definitely to consider and talk to people about the pros and cons. Yeah, it would be nice. it would be a nice kind of happy medium. I agree. I just know in other communities, they avoid them in urban areas because of the issues with that, but good, it's a good idea.
Commissioner Dunham?
Yeah, I have like a data related question. So prior to the pilot, and I'm looking at the crash history for bike and ped right now, what was the prior striping status as compared to what's being proposed right now?
Talking about the layout of the road previously.
Yeah, so was it just the traditional one stripe? You had roughly 3 feet between you and the curb and gutter versus what you're proposing right now, which is a little bit wider with the 2-foot strip or 2 to 3 foot strip?
Yeah, it was a typical 4 foot from the white line to the lip of the gutter, and then the extra 18 inches to the curb to 4.5. So it's either 4 or 4.5, depending on where you're at. Those roads got really narrow when we added the medians in the middle. That's not a visual effect, that's real. They're actually quite narrow.
So the proposal to just do the painted striping would be an increase of a slightly wider space for cyclists with with the painted. Granted, it's not a raised, but it would be different than what it would have reverted to before.
Yes, we'd keep the narrowed lanes and take the barrier space and turn it into painted buffer. So yes, it would be it would definitely be an improvement because you have 2 white lines and you'd have a little more space.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner?
Can I just ask a question, Jeff, about these raised bike lanes? Where is that in a budget process? It seems like if we're making a decision on, removing, striping, and then raising, where can we be most, effective here?
Yeah, a couple of points on that. We are spending probably Proposition 419 money to do this design effort. And part of that 15% design is, does it even fit? Can you even do this? And the other, and probably yes, you can always engineer a solution, but then how much does it cost? We expect it to come in millions for this section. It's very expensive. My understanding of ATMP prioritization is that, that project's always been out there, on the ATMP, that's always been a long-term project. So converting Butler bike lanes to separated facilities was not a priority in the ATMP. So the way, at least for now, that we've been handling at a staff level is we want to get the 15% design done, figure out how much it costs. Maybe it's cheaper than we thought. We can find a way to fund it. But what we think we're going to do is chase federal grants or state grants for this project, along with those 2 separated intersection concepts at Beaver and Butler that we talked about. So those are each $1 million to rebuild San Francisco and Beaver, and then the separated lanes in between. This could easily be $5 million from Milton to Sawmill. And that's Martin said, that's like 4 years of his funding to do this mile. So that's why it didn't make the priority. But there are federal grants out there that this would be very eligible for. There's a lot of new money. I can't say that, you never know how that'll go, but I think we have a good shot at the federal grant process. Does that help? Yeah, we didn't really talk about that in detail, and I made a note we will next time we talk about this with groups. We need to talk through that whole.
Absolutely, and I think that's to my point. I just feel uncomfortable making a hard decision tonight on removal without seeing the big picture here and making sure that we are supporting prioritization of funding for an effort like this that was community driven. To ramp up the prioritization of this project in particular.
Taking a stab here at summarizing recommendations of the commission. I think we're pretty comfortable saying that the commission supports the long-term plan of the separated bike lanes achieved through essentially expanding the sidewalk and having that as shared use with pedestrians and bicyclists. There's a large amount of concern expressed by the commissioners with removing the curbs and having, as particularly on Butler, having the vehicular traffic and bicycle traffic essentially commingling without any sort of physical barrier. I've also heard that the commissioner understands the challenges on Butler in particular with the space in the roadway and is more supportive of removing those barriers than they are on Beaver because there has not been as much expressed as far as the challenges on Beaver. It gets fuzzy with the recommendations as far as removing the curbs and going to a painted as far as a unanimous agreement. But I think we are definitely can say that the commission unanimously agrees to the long-term plan of having a separated bike lane that is essentially part of the sidewalk. Does everybody feel that adequately expresses everybody's opinions, recommendations? And is that okay for, does that give you enough, Jeff, or?
To say, I appreciate the attempted summarization there.
Yeah.
It's very impressive.
I gave it my best.
Yeah, I think that's good for us. Again, we will talk to the Bicycle Advisory Committee and Pedestrian Advisory Committee coming up. And then we'll work our way into City Council May 30th. So we'll have some opportunity. Hopefully we get the latest crash data so we can update that slide with this winter's 6 months. There's no reason we can't count bikes again when it warms up. We just wanted to get, we hoped last week, obviously we knew it was early. Weather was good, but it is pretty early to see a lot of cyclists out. So especially this winter. So we'll do that again. So with some fresh data for council, it may look a little different. But yeah, so thank you for the recommendation and the discussion. Tune in May if you're interested. It'll be like the week before our June commission meeting.
Yep. Oh, great discussion, great information, and great data to base it around. Moving on our agenda here, we're running a little long, so I will touch on these briefly. A reminder to commissioners and to the public, the reports for the Bicycle Advisory Committee and the Pedestrian Advisory Committee are provided in the agenda here. So there's a link on there, and I believe there's also access virtually and in person for those committee meetings as well.
I have one question. When I click on that link, it just takes me to the Bicycle Advisory Committee page and tells me when the meetings are. Is the goal of that link just to click on the latest, most recent minutes?
Do it. I just did what you just said. Yeah, and then you can click here. You just scroll down a little and you see the current agenda and current minutes. It kind of gets you to everything.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. I was afraid it wasn't working at all.
No, I think that the link just said report, and I clicked on it. I didn't see like a specific report, and so I didn't know if I was missing something or not. But
we could retitle that.
It'll teach me to click on the links before I say that there's something there. Okay, next item here, informational items. Are there any other discussion items from the commission that is not on the agenda that we want to make a part of future agenda? Commissioner Koenig?
is this the back and forth? I just have another question for staff. I see that big new development is coming along and mostly complete over by Sawmill Plaza. And I know as part of that, they're adding a urban trail connection to Sawmill Road. Do you have any update? I see that section there is done, but like when would we expect that to be complete and connect all the ways down to the wash?
Martin may have the latest on that connection. I don't think they connect. I believe they were dedicating the space and we were going to build the trail. I don't know where that stands exactly, but I get back to you. Martin will know if he's available still, but
Oh,
Martin,
man,
did you
I was
hear the
so
question?
excited to see it finally get connected.
Yeah, this is the student housing development on Sawmill and the Foots connection down to the wash. Is there timing on that piece?
Yeah. Sorry, this is Martin. The development is building a part of it up to their property line, and that includes going down most of that grade to kind of to get down into that canyon. Then to connect over to the Sinclair Wash Trail, we need, I think, acquisition from 2 parcels, and then it gets onto a city property. And there may be a little bit of a technical issue with getting across the Rio and what we need to do to that. But all those complications notwithstanding, we have money in one of the future years for that project. And I'm sorry, I don't know which one exactly, but it's funded in our 5-year plan.
Okay, well, at least hopefully there'll be like one of those footpaths unofficially that connects those two little sections. Thanks for the additional details on that.
Yeah, just one additional thing. If when the development gets built and that trail's in place and it kind of dead ends, that may change how we think about the priority of moving that forward. Like if it's there and ready for us to go, we may move that up.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? Excellent. Jeff, do you want to give us quick updates on these items?
Yeah, I can go through this really quick. Fremont Boulevard traffic calming, you're mostly familiar with that. We're trying to set up a kind of a public meeting, and we're waiting for weather because the whole idea is to go out and walk the sidewalks and check things out. So Martin's been in contact with the neighborhood, and that will get scheduled, and we're hoping to have that on agenda in June. So that'll be good. Metro Plan, Flagstaff Regional Transportation Plan is out. It actually may have, public comment may have closed at this point unless they extended it. But that was the reason I put that on there. There's a regional, we've seen the presentation, but it officially, the whole document is out on their website if you want to make comment on that. Boulder Point traffic calming, David had a successful meeting with the city council since our last meeting. I don't remember how many weeks ago it was, but they agreed with the Transportation Commission's recommendation to keep moving with the Boulder Point project. And we have the designer plugging away. They will be done late spring, early summer. So we're still planning to get to construction this year. So even with kind of some timing there, we think we're still going to be able to do it this year, which will be great. Those temporary barriers are also a huge maintenance headache for Sam. Last one, this is somewhat related. You know about Flagstaff Dark Skies. So we've been asked to go to the American Astronomical Society's annual meeting this summer and talk about our engineering standards. So we have dark skies lighting standards that are fairly unique. And the local astronomers want to just do a better job of getting the word out that we have a code that can be followed by other communities. So kind of a tag team effort with the city and the county. So that'll be kind of fun. Just mention that in case you're going to be at the AAS meeting this summer. Fremont in June and role of Transportation Commission, we'll probably get to it because the agenda looks light at this point, unless you have anything else for the agenda. At this point, that's all we have. So thank you for a good discussion tonight.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, David. Thank you for the other staff and public. I appreciate everybody's input and conversation and hanging in there for a few extra minutes this evening. So thank you all. Have a good evening.